Okay, y'all, what's up? My name's JS Method, or Coach JS, or Jamie as y'all may know me as, and today I want to talk about my top 5 most common silver mistakes. Alright, so I've been a professional coach for coming up on about 2 years now, and I kind of want to talk about, I've seen hundreds of players play, maybe thousands at this point, hundreds of, players in the bronze, silver, and gold kind of ELO bracket, and I want to talk about kind of the top 5 most common mistakes I see from the silver kind of range. Right, so the first thing I want to mention is I already created my most common bronze mistakes video, and definitely check that one out if you haven't seen this one, because it's very common that your rank is an average, right? And I think that's something that's important to talk about. Your rank is an average, right? So let's say if you may do one thing at a platinum 4 level. But if everything else you do what you do at a bronze 4 level, well, it's going to even out into an average of, wherever it ends up being, whether that's silver 4 or high bronze or low gold or whatever. So you may be missing some of the bronze mistakes, and you may even do all of these things, but these are the most common things I see. So the number one thing is, this is the rank where usually people are kind of, they decided they're going to put some time into the game. Hopefully they have more than 10 games played. You're starting to play more solo queue. Hopefully you've picked a champion or two that you've liked. You kind of have a champion pool. And this is when we're really trying to refine just our basic mechanics. That's mistake number one. Oftentimes when I watch silver players, there are just base fundamental skills that we're not able to execute on. Right? This is things like last hitting, right? If you're not able to last hit or CSing, especially while manipulating the wave, right? If you're not able to CS and wave wave manipulation, you have to be able to get the minions and last hit the minions while you're freezing. You have to be able to get the minions while you're shoving, while you're slow pushing, and you have to be able to just get the minions in general, right? That's a common example. Information gathering. This is a really, really big one. And this is one that I'm going to have a whole point on, because this is something that this is probably the number one biggest mistake I see. And that's my whole second point. Just information gathering. That means hitting tab and seeing what your opponents came back with, seeing if they bought a stopwatch, looking at your mini map, right? That's a mechanic that we develop. Moving your camera. All of these things are gathering information, and it's really, really important that we can gather the information so we can make the best possible decision based off of what we know at the time, right? Something about League is there's always multiple decisions you can make at multiple points in the game, but the only way that you can kind of reliably and consistently make the right decisions is by having all of the information, right? So being able to move your camera, right? And doing that kind of thing. Other just basic mechanics are click accuracy, and being able to kind of move your character well and kind of land skill shots and dodge skill shots. One thing you can do to check your click accuracy, I guess, and APM, which is just actions per minute, which isn't something I'd worry too much about, but LOL dodge game. Coach Curtis has a great video on this. Otherwise, you can just go look up LOL dodge game. This will come up. It's a great way to practice just moving around and clicking without actually playing League. And I actually use this with some of my clients, this little web mini game, as kind of a benchmark to see kind of how is your clicking and stuff. You know what I mean? So what I'll usually do is I'll go into LOL dodge game, you pick the dodge one, and then you pick skill shots plus dodges, and then you go on hard mode. And if you're a silver player and you're consistently can't break 2000 and your APM is consistently below 300, I'll say, well, that's a pretty good indicator that you're just not comfortable moving your character around. Right? It's gonna be hard for you to space correctly. It's gonna be hard for you to tether correctly. It's gonna be hard for you to dodge skill shots, that kind of thing, right? So click accuracy, being able to move around, landing skill shots if your champion has them, dodging skill shots no matter what, attack move, right? Different keybinds, right? Attack move is kind of for attack accuracy and kind of click accuracy in terms of you attacking. It's not a huge thing on a lot of mages and stuff, but it's really, really important for attack-based champions, right? So champion specific combos / micro, right? So basic mechanics, very big thing. All right, my second point is probably the biggest, most common mistake I see. The basic mechanic thing is the most fundamental. You have to get this fixed before you move on to gold and platinum and diamond. The second one is the most common. I see this pretty much in every single bronze, silver, or gold client I coach. And it's camera panning. Actually, I'll say camera control, because there's two parts to camera control, right? I call the first part the smaller, like micro control. And this is like smaller micro control. This is kind of your, like, moving your camera in lane, playing off locked camera, small camera movements in lane and in fights. And then there's kind of this bigger macro camera panning where you move your camera actually like from mid lane, if you're playing a mid laner, to the bot lane or to your jungler or to your top laner. The bigger macro camera panning to side lanes or jungle or whatever, or just anything, right? Or etc. So camera panning is definitely the most common thing, right? Oftentimes players play with their camera too locked in this elo, like they'll just have a locked camera, or they don't move it at all, or they're slow with the movements, or they don't pan their camera at all, right? So this part kind of goes into information gathering, right? Information gathering is kind of a term that I use as a coach to talk about all of the skills, like moving your camera and looking at the minimap and all of that. But camera control in general, more specifically, is very poor. So make sure you're not playing with your camera locked. You know, if you have a really big monitor, something that I like to talk about is drag scrolling, right? This is something that I've had a couple of clients come to me with like really big monitors, so they can't move their camera as easy. Then you just drag scroll. What drag scrolling is when you hold a button, whatever you bind the key to, and then move your mouse. Instead of your mouse moving your cursor, you'll move your camera. So if you have a really big monitor, you don't actually have to move your mouse to the edge of the screen. So it's a little bit quicker. And if you can't get the feel for camera control, it's definitely something to try. But yeah, just getting comfortable moving your camera. Okay, the third thing is basic jungle tracking, basic jungle timers and tracking. Right, so it's very, very common that there are some timers where we just don't know in this elo, and then we kind of just die or don't pay attention to things that are super important, that are super obvious. So here, let me write down kind of the most important, I think. And I'm going to draw on the map for this one because these are a bit important. Okay, so the first most common one I see is this 230 timer. And if you know what it is, great. If you're a silver player, you know that's great, because most don't. This is where you have to have your first type of vision down, right? 230 is the first expected gank, right? Pretty much any jungler can gank really easily at this point. So expect this to be your first gank. So you have to have ward by now, right? So put down your ward at 230. There are some junglers that'll gank a little bit earlier. You know, the junglers that can gank at level 2. It's a couple of cheesy ones, right? Any cheesy jungler, Twitch, Shaco, J4 can, J4, Xin Zhao can, Xin. So yeah, these guys can gank at level 2, which is earlier than this. But if they can't gank for it at level 2, all the other junglers in the game can gank you at this point, especially if you're misplaying. Well, why can they gank you here? It's because if they clear, let's say we're playing blue side and we're kind of in lane here, we're playing mid lane, and they clear their bot side, then they can come and gank you just through crossing over, right? It's kind of the crossover point. Or if they're getting top, or if they're clearing top and they just gank you on the crossover point. Or if they 3 camp and they're, you know, they start red and they go red and they go blue grump, they'll be slightly later, but it's around the same time they'll be coming to gank you. So you can't really tell what side it's on. You have to have some sort of vision down by now. So get your first ward down before 230 and make sure, like, hopefully you know what side they started on by checking who leashed, whatever. But yes, this 230 timer is super important. It's very common that players in this elo just won't get any type of jungle tracking down, any vision. They won't see what side the enemy started on by this point, and then you just die to the gank. And it's like, of course you do, right? And it's kind of tricky because you won't die to it every game, because again, you're also playing against silver junglers, and they won't see these opportunities right away. They won't see you didn't ward, whatever. So you'll only lose some of your games to it, so it won't seem like a really big problem, but you are just strictly losing lane straight away from not knowing this timer, so just put it down. The next timer I have here is 315, and hopefully more people know this one. This is when both crabs spawn, right? So You know, this is helpful because you can expect the junglers to be finishing their 5 camp or their full clear by now. If you know what side they started on, or you have a good ward from 230, you should be able to see what side they're on, so it tells you where to stand to be more safe. And, you know, maybe your jungler and you can go contest it if you have priority, whatever. Just knowing that's spawning because they'll be in this river by then. And at 650, this timer is kind of, you know, give or take a couple of seconds. But this is when the first buff that the enemy jungler takes respawns. You know, so if they started blue, and you know that, they started right here, you know, around 650, give or take a couple of seconds, this will be back up, and you can expect them to kind of be on the side down here, pathing towards this or taking this, right? So basic jungle timers. If you don't know anything about jungle tracking, these are kind of the 3 that I would start with. 230 is definitely the most important, but also understand the crab timer and what that means for you, and the first buff respawning timer. Super important. Okay. Number 4 is champion identity. Now, champion identity is just, I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the role your champion does and fulfills within each game, right? So your identity is what you have to do to win, right? So different champions have different identities. Different champions have different strengths and weaknesses and excel in different areas. If you're playing, let me think of an example. If you're playing a burst mage, let's say you're playing Zoe. Burst mage. If you're playing Zoe, then you know that, okay, you have a really strong lane phase. You have pretty good wave control, especially because of your strong lane phase. You have good roam potential, and your champion doesn't necessarily scale well. Right, you still have your bubbles, so you won't be absolutely useless, but your damage is definitely going to fall off. What does that mean? Oh, and you know, your damage is very bursty, right? So what does that mean? Well, first of all, you win lane, and then you look to kind of spread your lead through good roams. And then in the late game, you look for picks with your burst of damage. You try to get vision control. You try to kind of one-shot people and then leave. So that means, you know, you need to find good flanks. You want to be in the side lane. You don't want to be sitting in mid lane the whole time. You can't play front to back. You have to win lane by a substantial amount. You have to have good roams. All of those things are identity things, which are unique to your champion, right? If you're playing, let's say we're playing Kassadin, it's much different, right? Kassadin still doesn't want to front to back, but Kassadin doesn't have to win lane as hard. Kassadin doesn't have to roam as much in the early game. But Kassadin's going to have much more of an impact in the mid and late game, right? So champion identity is just understanding what your champion does, because that's how you climb in solo queue. You understand what your role is, and then you fulfill your job. If you do your job, you win, right? You climb, or you don't necessarily win, but you'll climb. That's how you climb. You do your job. Another reason this is so important is because this gives you perspective to whether or not your play was bad. Because again, let's use this example of Zoe and Kassadin. If we're looking at this lane phase and Zoe takes a roam bottom and Kassadin takes a roam bottom, you know, if you're looking at that, not thinking about the champion, we may say, you know, who knows if that's a good or bad roam? Well, if we're playing Zoe, we can kind of extrapolate that this is how Zoe wants to win. We have to get our bot lane ahead, and Zoe's going to be much more effective in that gank. That roam's a better choice for Zoe. For Kassadin, he's not going to have as much impact, and he doesn't need his bot lane to be his head, and he really doesn't want to be losing XP mid lane. So the roam is not as good an idea for Kassadin, right? So for Kassadin, for roam to be worth it for Kassadin, it'll have to be much more easier roam, right? It'll have to be much more just given to him, where Zoe can kind of look at opportunities a little bit easier, right? So champion identity gives you an idea of perspective. It gives you kind of a framework to look at whether a play is good or bad. And it's very important because you need to know if you did your damn job or not. Okay. Number 5 is quickness. Just general quickness in everything. Quickness, stop the lazy, things like being able to just be quicker with your decision making, being quicker with your combos, being quicker with everything you do, right? You want to just do it Then you can look back in the review, kind of see, you know, did I do my job? Was this a good or bad play? And then kind of go from there. But in this elo, just everything is slow, right? So just make sure that you keep refining everything. Make sure you're not letting yourself be lazy. Make sure you're putting in the work. Try to ward at the right timers. You know, if you know you have to shove as fast as you can, right? The game is, you can kind of think about the game at this point as a series of mini games, right? I think that's what LS calls it. And if you know a certain mini game is coming up, you try to optimize that mini game, right? So a common example I see is if you're playing like a ranged champion and you're trying to weave in auto attacks, you can think about the auto attack timers as a beat, right? If your attack speed is, let's just say 0.75, that means you can attack 0.75 times per second. That's what this, that's what the League of Legends attack speed means. And so that means the beat's going off 0.75 times a second, just like this. And if you're trying to shove, you should not miss a beat. You cannot miss a beat or you're losing damage per second, right? So like that's a mini game. If you're trying to weave in autos and you can, don't miss a beat. If you're trying to shove a wave, use all of your spells, try to hit as many things as you can, be as efficient as possible, right? If you're trying to freeze as good as possible, right? All of these mini games, you can work to optimize your decision making. You can work to optimize your camera panning. You can work to always get faster and crisper. So do that, right? You can always just, at this point, pretty much everything you do can get better. Your clicks can get crisper. Your cursor can get closer to the center. Everything you do can get a little bit better, so make sure you do it. Anyways, guys, this is my top 5 common silver mistakes. Make sure you check out the bronze one, and I will be making videos for future elos in the future. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys check out my other videos and check out my Twitch at twitch.tv/jsmethod, and all the links will be in the description. Let me know if you guys have any video ideas. I appreciate y'all watching. Y'all have a blessed night. I'll see you around. Peace.